Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to America's Heroes Group on WVON 1690 AM, the Talk of Chicago. I am Vietnam veteran host Cliff Kelley. America's Heroes Group is a live streaming podcast, global platform, radio, print, and digital media broadcast show that empowers change agents through intentionally disseminating information, resources, and referrals to empower our military population.
And that was the incredible, iconic voice of Cliff Kelley. I am his co-host, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer and master of the arts is Ivan Ortega, Scouts Honor Productions. He is here live in person, so if you ever want an autograph, come by and say hello to him. We are moving on today with a very, very special person, a panelist that we have. It's Marlon Harvey. Marlon Harvey is a retired Chicago police officer of 33 years of service. Thank you for your service, Marlon. And also the president of the Chicago Police Sailing Association, instructor with the Chicago Maritime Arts Center for mariners in training class in Chicago Public Schools, and also a level 2 archery instructor with Chicago Archery Club. He is the Commodore of the Jackson Park Yacht Club, and most important, father of 2 veterans, Go Navy, Go Army. He's talking about Brandon Harvey, U.S. Navy, who served on the USS Roosevelt, and then also Brian Harvey, U.S. Army, a combat veteran serving in Afghanistan. And our prayers and thoughts go with them, and stay in the power. You are part of the family. Okay, how are you doing, Marlon?
How are you? Good evening. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, you're 33 years of service. We have to come on, talk about your life, about what you've seen for 33 years in the service to our city, and thank you so much for your service. We just don't give enough recognition to our members who serve on our Chicago Police Department. Today's discussion is going to be honoring U.S. Navy, U.S. Coast Guard veteran Captain Bill Pinkney. What an incredible history. You know, you sort of enlightened us a little bit about his history. I knew a little about him before, but this is really incredible, some of the accomplishments he made. Why don't you tell us about Captain Pinkney?
Yes, I will. I'll tell you as much as I know. As you know, I am a little younger than Bill. There are people that are in his age group that I am friends with and that I have talked to often, especially in the last few days of planning for his service, his recognition ceremony that we're doing at the DuSable next week. So I will tell you as much as I know. I've talked to him. I've shared time with him. He actually called me a few months ago from Puerto Rico. That's where he lives. That's where he lived when he left Chicago. And he asked me if he could. I thought it was very gracious of him, and it goes to the point I'm going to make in a few moments of how much he thought about our young children. And Bill called and asked if his children's book that was written for him by Pam Rice, if he could donate the book to our yacht club, Jackson Park Yacht Club, at no cost to us at all. And then we would sell the book, and we would have the proceeds, and just make sure that the kids got the book. Wow. So I talked to him just that recently, earlier this month. But as you know, Bill is a U.S. Navy veteran as well. He joined the Navy not too long after leaving high school in the late 50s. He later became a U.S. Coast Guard Master's boat captain. He's most known as a captain of a vessel called the Amistad. Yeah. If you're familiar with the history of the Amistad, it's the slave ship that came to America that got liberated. There's a replica of the Amistad that was built in the Mystic River area by the Mystic Seaport Museum. Bill was part of building that replica ship. He then became the captain of that ship and sailed it for three or more years, as I know. He used that opportunity, sailing that ship, the Mystic ship, from ports, different ports, to educate young children on the history of the ship and Black excellence in sailing, and just to share his experiences. And he actually was part of creating that ship and sailing that ship, just to give you some background on that.
Yes. Yeah, and one of the things that really stood out to me about his history too, because I remember, going through geography and studies on, global affairs and all that, going through school, even going back to elementary school, and I remember them saying, you had to have some guts to think about going around Cape Horn, and he was the first Black man to sail solo around the world, and went around Cape Horn, because that is, for people who know, so it's down in the lower part of Africa, and it is treacherous. Many sailors did not come back from that, and he was doing this thing solo.
Yeah, so actually the most notorious horn is the one by South America.
Oh, South America. Okay, yes. Okay.
That's the one where there are, unnumbered amount of shipwrecks. That's the one where sailors feared, and that actually, if you remember the story of mutiny on the Bounty, the captain of that ship threatened to take the crew around the Horn, and they didn't want to go, and so they mutinied the ship because they thought it was a suicide mission. But you're right, to do it alone is, there's no words to explain it, and I can share the sentiment with you because I'm a sailor myself. I've been sailing for just a bit over 20 years. And as you know, the Great Lakes here in Chicago, especially Lake Michigan, is very, very dangerous.
Very dangerous, yes. Treacherous waters, yeah.
It is. So I can only imagine, only dream of what it could feel like to be an open ocean, day and night. Think about the nighttime, on an open ocean, like the Southern Ocean, that you'd have to cross the Horn in.
I can't even imagine that. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about it and saying, being on an open ocean, and I remember my first flight, with the military going overseas, and it was the first time I went overseas, and I remember seeing this one ship, and I was looking at it in the water, and it turned out this thing, it looked like a little piece of a speck of dust on the ocean. That thing was an ocean liner. Then I started realizing what that looks like and compare it to the scale of the ocean. And for someone to be out there by themselves doing that, that is just phenomenal. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, I can tell you this, and I'm speaking for myself now as a sailor, and I can only imagine that Bill probably would understand this as well, is when you are out there on the water, there's a sense of peace that comes over you. There's a calmness that comes, serenity out there. And you realize that your humanness comes into play. We kind of lose that in the hustle and bustle of the city.
Yes.
And so, this is provided, of course, you have the experience and the knowledge to be out there in the first place. So that's a given. But you just kind of settle in, you do what you know needs to be done, and you enjoy the ride. As things get tough, and there are tough days and nights out there, I know, and I'm sure Bill experienced as well, you just buckle down, and every time you experience an event, you learn a little bit more, and you just keep pushing. You keep pushing. So, I tip my hat to him. I will always, because I know what it's like being out there in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And that was very courageous.
And he was inducted into the National Sailing Hall of Fame, right, in 2021?
Yes. Yes. Wow. Again, when you think about Black excellence in sailing, okay, these are monumental things. Let's back up and consider that for a moment. This is what I would call a non-traditional sport. We have a couple of non-traditional sports, that our young youth can get involved in, and this is one of them. So that narrows your percentages of participation down to a small number.
Yes.
And then when you start talking about the type of achievements that he made, that number gets smaller. The number's so small that right now it's one, because he's the only one that's done it, right? Went around the world.
Right.
So, when we think about Black excellence in sailing, this is one for the books. And I don't know that the things that he's achieved will ever be matched, if you think about it. And continually, for half of a lifetime for most of us, if you think about it.
Yes.
It's not like he just did this for a few years. He's been doing this for a long time.
Very long time, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, one of the things that's coming up also, that I just wanted to mention it now, and I guess we'll bring it up again, as the show goes on, but there's an event that's occurring where Captain Bill Pinkney will have a memorial celebration on November 4th at the DuSable Museum, and that's near 55th Street and Cottage Grove for people who aren't that familiar. But wonderful museum, first of all, about African American history. But then, to honor someone like Captain Bill Pinkney is just so apropos. It makes so much sense. So I'm not sure if you can tell us more about that.
I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, I myself, Jackson Park Yacht Club, the committee that's been working on planning for November 4th, I'd have to, I'd be remiss if I did not mention J.P. Betty from Atlanta, Mark Stevenson, Pam Rice. There's quite a few committee members, but those three are very, very close friends of Bill Pinkney's. They've sailed with him. As a matter of fact, another, and I'm going to get to the November 4th, but I just keep thinking about these things that are so important. Another notable thing that Bill was a part of was the first all-black crew to enter and race in the Chicago to Mackinac Island race, the longest freshwater race in the world. Bill Pinkney was on the boat in Jackson Park Yacht Club. Pam Rice was one of the crew members, and they sailed that boat in the Mac race.
Wow.
So these names I mentioned, they go back years with history with Bill, years. And so it's another marker right there. And if you don't know, I'll just tell you in the audience, the Chicago to Mackinac Island race is probably one of the most demanding races for at our level. There are professional racers that get on $2 million boats and sail all over the world, but at our level, it is the pinnacle race to be in, and it's 3 days on the water, day and night, and it's quite a feat. So I just want to give a shout out to them and DuSable Museum as well for hosting the event. I think this is going to be a history marker for them as well, and it is November 4th at 11 a.m. DuSable Museum. It's like 11 to like 2 o'clock, and we're going to have a host of speakers. His family will be there, the sailing community. We welcome everyone. If the auditorium is full, we would ask that people make themselves as safe and comfortable as they can with the space that's available. We just want to be there and recognize and honor what he's done for our community there at DuSable. And then after DuSable Museum, we're meeting at Jackson Park Yacht Club, which is 6400 South Promontory Drive, at 3 p.m. to continue honoring him as a meet and greet and just fellowship together and just talk about his legacy on that day. It will be live streamed. I would ask that people check Bill's Facebook page, Bill Pinkney. There should be a link there. We will also put the link for the live stream on our Jackson Park Yacht Club Facebook page. That will be included as soon as it's created, and so that if you cannot participate, you can watch it. As I understand it, Bill is known all over the world. There are countries in Africa, England, the East Coast, all the islands in the Gulf, Puerto Rico, which is his home forever, that want to participate. So it's being live streamed to make this available to everyone.
Wow, amazing. Because one of the things that really struck me too is that he was taking educators and other people on sailing voyages that trace the slave trade routes as well, because that has a lot to do with the history of how people moved, through the lake systems and through the waterways. And it's amazing the kind of depth you can get into with what he was doing, as you were talking about the global perspective, but also our local perspective here as well.
Yes, that would have been around the time he was doing his having his experiences with the Amistad sail vessel, showing the slave road and all the history that led up to that. But again, everything that he acquired, knowledge and experience, he shared, and he loved the children. Every time his name comes up, no matter who I'm talking to, that's the first thing they say to me, is how much he loved the kids. And I'm going to tell you, I remember before I became a sailor, over 20 years ago, in the 90s, I remember when he was going to the Chicago public schools through the neighborhoods and going there and doing lectures, presentations on screen, because at the time I was in Morgan Park, and he came to an elementary school in Morgan Park, and I remember Bill Pinkney was there. It was all over the news. And this was before I even dreamed of being a sailor. So I know firsthand that he was doing that. He was going through all the neighborhoods trying to share and expose our young people to his experiences. And that is very key in mentoring, because our young people and our inner city kids, there's this element of feeling that a lot of things that they see on television or dream of are not accessible to them, that's not for me. And so when you have someone reaching out and saying, hey, we're here, you're welcome, we want to show you what we do, and we want to let you know that you can be a part of it. And I've always admired that, because I was that kid. I was the kid that in South Shore, I had a bike when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I'd ride my bike all through the neighborhood, and I would ride on the bike path and pass Jackson Park Yacht Club and look over there and see those boats, and all I would say is, ooh, look at that, and keep going.
So that was the aura, pulled you
go,
in.
Ooh, oh, wow, look at that. And I just keep riding, didn't think a minute of it. And then here I am. Yeah. I've been there 20 years sailing, made great friends, great experiences, raced, and now I'm the Commodore.
Well, we have 1 more minute to go, so I was going to have you give that plug again about the DuSable and why it's important for us to listen and learn this history.
So at DuSable Museum, we are actually going to plan to create an exhibit for the maritime industry, highlighting Bill Pinkney for the future and in Black excellence of sailing. Excellent. So that's a long-term goal, and that will be at the DuSable Museum. So we ask everybody to stand by for that, so that will be there forever to continue exposing all of his work.
Well, Commodore Harvey, we have to have you back on again, I'm telling you. But we have to go to a commercial break now, but we are looking forward to having you back on. Thank you so much for your education for us. But stay tuned to America's Heroes Group. We will be back right away. Don't move anywhere. Stay on that dial.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing.
Oh man, they're trying to make me feel good with this music. Anyway, this is America's Heroes Group and the Roundtable Partner Veteran Affairs Legislative Voice, a podcast and AHG correspondent. Today is Saturday, October 28th, 2023. October is also Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Pay attention to those and try to help those in need and people you can help to prevent them from going through those situations. Host is Cliff Kelley, the iconic. I am the co-host, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And Scouts Honor, he is fantastic. Today's topic, we have Stephanie Kalota. She is a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant, First Class, veteran, and founder of this and creator of the Veteran Legislative Voice podcast, and she is also one of our esteemed AHG correspondents. Her topic is going to be covering the new speaker and how his policies could affect military and veterans. And when I say the speaker, I'm talking about none other than Mike Johnson. How will his policies affect our military and our veterans? How are you doing, Stephanie?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing today?
Oh, good. Yeah, you have really a very, very timely topic. I think that's really important. So it's like you're on top of the media buzz.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
So why don't you tell us what's your view on how this new speaker will affect our veterans' benefits and what we can actually look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to speak about this person because for a lot of people that were even just that were actually trying to track and watch what was going on with the entire mess about trying to get a new Speaker of the House, a lot of people were not familiar with Representative Mike Johnson. He was kind of a sleeper, he came out of nowhere for a lot of people and kind of surprised. So people are unfamiliar with him and his issues and his voting record, and it can actually cause some effects in the next session in a couple of months with everything going on. And Representative Mike Johnson is from Louisiana, which has been a hot topic lately. It's not directly with military and veterans, but it's kind of important down the road for when it comes to voting because Louisiana has been having a lot of issues with its districts and trying to get it remapped for gerrymandering. And one of Mike Johnson's district is part of the entire contention. And so it's going to possibly change the next voting session and everything with, it's presidential election next year, so it can really cause a lot of effects. And with him being a speaker, he can try to do some more push and pull and influence to try to keep it towards the GOP and conservative side. So we have to be mindful of that as well. But with for military and veterans, he's voted against bills that have really helped or could help a lot of veterans. He voted against the PACT Act last year. And for those that aren't familiar, the PACT Act is one of the most progressive bills that has ever passed for veterans for all of the toxic exposures that they might have been exposed to when they went to the Gulf War and post 9/11 wars and operations. And it listed a lot of conditions that were that made them automatically presumptive. To that way, if a service member comes up with a lung condition, then lung cancer, and if they served in the wars covered under the PACT Act, they're automatically, qualified for it. They just have to file the claim, and that's all they have to do.
Yes. Yeah, and thank goodness that the PACT Act actually went through despite his negative vote on it on the on the bill. And
Yeah.
because he had just joined Congress in 2017, and from what I understand, he then served as the vice chairman of the House Republican Conference since 2020. So as you said, he came out of sort of nowhere, but he has elevated himself to a position where he's now, like, I think the third person in line or second person in line, after the president, if the president leaves office for any other reason.
Third.
Or third,
He's
yeah.
He's the third after the vice president. It would be the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
So, and also, speaking of elections and political offices, he was actually one of the leaders that had led the fight to decertify the election for President Biden.
Yeah, that shocks me, because one of the things is like, when you had sent us some information, I read that, and it's like we are still not sure if he has any kind of criminal involvement in that conspiracy either.
We're not even sure if he's completely guilty of possible insurrection, if he had anything to do with January 6th, because this topic came up a lot for Jim Jordan because his name was out there the most for the January 6th committee investigations. So this one with Mike Johnson, he was still on the list. He just wasn't as visible as Jim Jordan's.
Yeah, and it's really disturbing to me because we have at least 4 attorneys have pled guilty so far, and it's worrisome to me because I'm sitting there going like, if people are pleading guilty, then you start wondering, are you really working for the people or are you just working for your party? And that's something that we have got to start looking at because that is something that if we don't start looking at the country, I'm a veteran, so I'm pretty much nonpartisan. I've voted for Republicans and Democrats, right, over time, the course of my life, when I thought that they were doing the right thing. But this is something that I think they have to understand, that this is about whether we have a sovereign nation anymore. And to put someone into a political position where they have so much power and they have potentially been involved in criminal activities is just mind-blowing to me.
Yes, and it's so scary of how close we were to actually losing our sovereignty in the first place. So having the possibility of it occurring again is pretty terrifying. For those that were readers and have read A Handmaid's Tale, it was stark and really scary to watch January 6th because I've watched the show and I've read the books prior to the January 6th events, and I was like, it is just like in the book or just like in the TV show of how the sovereignty of the U.S. had fallen in, the book, in the fictional story, and how close it got. It was really similar and it was really scary.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't just that branch of government, but we had so many branches of government. We had 3 branches of government, but even the Supreme Court became embroiled in everything in this whole upheaval. We had even the legislative branch getting involved in this upheaval. Executive branch involved in this upheaval, and I'm going like, when is it when do you get to the point where we reestablish our country? This is from a very, very nonpartisan comment, is that it's the country and the people that matter, not what a political party wants to do to execute itself as being the lead party in our nation. Right. That they're supposed to be working together for our common people. So, even what you were saying before, I mean, even Johnson did support legislation making it easier for veterans to see doctors outside the DVA, the Department of Veterans Affairs. But it's a spotty record. It's like back and forth. The Defense Authorization Act, he was sort of back and forth on that, even though he, was supporting things in some positions and not. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that, how he sort of wavered a bit on some of the things and some of the dangers back there.
So a couple years ago, under President Trump's administration, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, which is what funds the federal DOD and VA side of the government, is where that funding will go through under that bill. And there was a lot of changes with that National Defense Authorization Act, and it went back and forth. And we had, just like all of the years before, we've had to use continuing resolutions to keep the government going. And in this place, we did have the government shut down, and President Trump had made last-minute stipulations on the National Defense Authorization Act. He didn't like the rule to change 6 military bases' names from their Confederate general name, the memorialization of a Confederate general's name, and then change it to something else that was not as, so that they're not named after treasonous people, obviously. Right. And President Trump had brought that up at the last second after everything else had been approved and passed and everything. And so Congress somehow decided to say screw it and send it to President Trump, and he vetoed it. Well, Congress was able to override his veto, which doesn't happen very often. You need a 2/3 vote for this. So 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. And at this time, and it's also true today, during this time, the split between the parties was 51-49. Huh. So, yeah, so they were able to get enough people on the opposite party to vote for it to override President Trump's veto, which is what Representative Johnson did do. He did vote for overriding President Trump's veto, which is kind of daunting to me that this actually happened. But you know what? He's voted against things that can be really controversial. I mean, he voted against one bill that would actually mandate the states recognize service members and their spouses valid professional licenses from other states when they have to PCS, when they have to move from one station to another. Mm-hmm. And, you know, military spouses' unemployment is remarkably high. I believe it's like 30%, while the country is below 6%. So it's really crazy, but that's because of how often they have to move. And so often spouses have to quit their jobs. And then when they move to another state, if they're a massage therapist, if they're a doctor, if they are a real estate agent, they have licensing that they have to pay for. And each individual state has their own licensing requirements, their own testing, their own fees. So this bill would have mandated the states to recognize service members and military spouses, you know, licenses from other states, which would have been a great thing to help, you know, with the unemployment numbers. And he voted against it.
Yes.
This wouldn't even cost the government money. Right. Because I know conservatives are so much about the money. This wouldn't even cost the government any money for this, by the way.
Yes, and you're also cutting off the services they could be providing to the public they're supposed to be serving.
Yes.
Because they had an essential part of our workforce. And
so often military families are on, they're on food stamps. And this could have happened. This could actually cause the government more money because if they only were back to a 2-income household back to a 1, right, then they might actually qualify for the benefits that would cost the government more money.
That's an excellent point, you know, and the whole licensure thing is so crazy to me. You know, I, recently had to recertify for my licensure for practicing medicine in Illinois. And so I got my Illinois license and my Illinois DEA, but I had to get the federal DEA. And when I contacted them, I said, you know, as I'm renewing this for $881, I said, why is it that you have 15 questions now? These new questions about whether you are certified for marijuana, this and that. I said, you're asking me all these questions about prescribing medications. But I said, but then I drive down the street and I have dispensaries all around me.
Yeah, exactly.
and they're right next to your FBI offices. They're next to all your.
Yeah.
So it's such a confused kind of thing with that. But again, I think you're right. You know, if we could have a national license for those people who are in the military and their spouses and their family members as they're moving, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. He's also voted against ensuring veterans won't lose their GI Bill benefits if a school has to close for a future emergency, just like the COVID pandemic. So he voted against that, protection for our veterans for their GI Bill benefits, which would, it would only help our veterans even more. We're giving out the money anyways, and it's really crazy how this how much this really would hurt veterans if it wasn't passed.
Yeah, and then, so the PACT Act, with the exposures now, we do have people who have toxic exposures, and thank God that they saw it and had the wisdom to do that, to pass it. But do you think that there are any complications coming down the road if they seize power? The one thing I learned, I was the director for the Illinois Department of Public Health in past life, and one of the things I learned is that legislators can change things overnight with the stroke of a pen, and they can act. So is this something that we have to think about with protecting these rights that we already have?
It's possible because actually a few years ago, I cannot remember the exact agency, but it was one of the conservative-backed nonprofits did their analysis of how to cut spending and how to decrease funding and things like this. And then one of the suggestions was to cut certain things for veterans benefits, and that would be the VA disability. One of them was a recommendation to actually cut VA disability once a veteran becomes eligible for Social Security, for the Social Security retirement benefits, instead of being able to collect both, which is pretty scary because certain veterans, like myself, I became fully disabled fairly early in life at 35, and I collect VA disability and Social Security at the same time because, I have enough work credits. I qualify for both, and I only do this voluntarily stuff, and so I don't make money for all of these things that I do for you guys, just FYI.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, all of this is just voluntary stuff that I do for stuff. So
sounds like we owe you a lot of lunches over here.
It's okay. It's okay. I have to be constantly working on something, despite how much problems I have. But for veterans, having that cut of having the Social Security or the VA disability cut is just so scary. For me, I'll even say it. I was lucky enough to earn enough and work long enough to collect Social Security at my age, and so I collect $2,100 a month. I wouldn't be able to survive on that, of just $2,100 a month. And then for VA disability being paid at 100%, I believe it's around $3,400 a month. So veterans can't live $3,400 a month in most states. Yes. It's really scary when you're being cut down to that amount of income for some people. I mean, just imagine trying to live in California at $3,400 a month. You can't do that, especially in the LA area of how expensive housing is. And with inflation going higher, it's even more scary. So these types of things need to be really understandable and explained out for that, so people are aware that this may happen. There's other benefits that they could also try to take away, and it's pretty scary that we have to be really cognizant of that. So we have to be aware. They have talked about taking away Social Security or raising the Social Security age. So, and then also talk about taxing Social Security, which was actually brought up by the Democrats in the first place in the early 90s. This talk is coming up again, but on the GOP side.
Scary. Absolutely terrifying. I was just thinking about that. It's that many of them actually don't really get their benefits through the same mechanisms, through as the executive branch does for our people from the Department of Defense and those places where almost none of them served at, right?
Yes.
So I know Johnson wasn't a service member as well, but
nope.
This thing is that it's so incredibly troublesome that we have people who are sitting there making decisions on veterans who don't really have that experience. And when I start thinking about the past rhetoric, because I met John McCain in the Capitol in the past, he was one of the greatest people I could ever speak to. A very, very nice person. Didn't always agree with all the policies he had, but he was forthright. He was acting in the right way that a responsible legislator should.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was a statesman.
He was a statesman.
He was a statesman.
Yes, and so he had disagreements, but he knew about meeting in the middle of the aisle on certain things, and he just went forward from there. So I always had deep respect for him and his family. So, but then to have him, people talking about his military service when they had bone spurs when stuck in the wood on the floor at their home.
Yes.
I get so enraged with that. And my family is the military family. And so when things like this are happening, where they're talking about cutting the Social Security, cutting the benefits, it's hitting me too personally. It's a personal attack. And so when I go to vote, I'm going to be voting for the people who actually are supporting our veterans. If they're not supporting the veterans, they don't need to be in office from my viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of a lot of the things that were added to this year's National Defense Authorization Act that a lot of people were against. There was a lot of extreme right policies that were inserted into that bill, and one of them was canceling any gender affirming care, not allowing transgenders in the military, prohibiting the use of reimbursements for travel costs for abortion services. There was another one. They could not use LGBTQ flags in or hang them in VA facilities. Little things. Like, seriously, that's what you're worried about? I'm worried about trying to get everybody, their paychecks.
How about having a Speaker of the House?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so scary right now. He was also against funding for giving more funding for Ukraine. So that's something that can be really scary as well.
Yes.
We're not sure about where his stance is. I'm not sure where his stance is about Israel, because that can cause a lot of issues. Although Israel has told the U.S., you know what, we got this, but we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of service members have gotten the alert of be ready just in case, and so. Who knows on how that might come out down the line? It can be really scary for us on those decisions.
Yes,
and Representative Mike Johnson was on the Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, so he has a little bit of knowledge of what goes on there, but not personal military knowledge. So we got to watch carefully and see how it goes from there when those things start moving.
Yeah, and you have big point, but an incredibly important point, Stephanie. So people are on alert right now who are going to be serving in a uniform, which is a very small fraction of our country, right, that actually ever serves. They're sitting there, and they may be deployed when their spouse can't get a job. And they're going to have to leave them here.
Shutdown.
And leave them there. And so their licenses and all those things, we're not going to worry about that. So you're voting against our service members' families while you're asking them to go overseas and put their life on the line.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yes, you're asking their families to make sacrifices, but we're not going to help you, try to make those sacrifices just a little bit easier.
Yeah. So what do you see as the things that we need to get involved in on the legislative horizon? Because it seems like you're really tied into it. You're one of the greatest legislative voices I've heard so far.
Thank you.
And your articles, people need to read your things too. So I'm just saying that. Go to your website. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, and I've been starting my own podcast as well because I just try to take small subjects and just break them down into 5-10 minute sections to make it really easy for people to understand. And so those things would make things really easy. So definitely, I always encourage people to contact their elected officials. Tell them what you're experiencing, what's going on, and what you need to make things just a little bit easier. Many elected officials, their staff, I mean, they really need to hear from their constituents. They understand things better when they do hear from their constituents. Look them up, give them a call, ask for the liaison that handles, whoever that handles military and veterans issues. If they don't have one, they usually will have at least somebody to speak with. Usually when I call my House representative, I speak to the legislative director because they don't have a military one assigned yet, but I still talk to them about different things and help them out on understanding military things. And that way they get a little bit more understanding, and then they also figure out how to vote and what to introduce in legislation, where to really put their stance on things. And it really does help them a lot. I mean, a lot of people don't think that they listen to their constituents, but they really do.
Yes, yes. And then one of those things, I'm an older guy, so I don't have to worry too much about what I say anymore. But but if you don't vote for our veterans, then if you don't put them first, we're going to put you last when it comes to voting. And
I always get really frustrated when elected officials play the partisan game, because if a Democrat introduced a bill or a Republican introduces a bill, and it really just helps out veterans and military, the opposite party almost always votes against it. I mean, very rarely they don't. So it's really frustrating for me, and I will call them out when they play that partisan game. I don't care.
Thank you. That's that was the thing where we were saying before about, they put the party first before the people. And and when you get to the point of we're doing that with veterans, boy, you should be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened with the PACT Act last year, and one of the frustrating things is that the opposite party had made up a lot of lies about what's in the PACT Act, so a lot of people became confused of what was in there, because there was actually accusations that there was pork barrel spending inside the PACT Act, when it really wasn't. It was funding to help build and create and lease facilities for the VA and servicing our veterans.
Well, Stephanie, we have about 2 minutes to go, but what I want to do is have you just give us a sort of a closeout, but, have Glenda circling around me, and you know about her.
Yes. Love you, Glenda.
Okay, so just give us an idea of what your main message is. Go ahead.
All right, well, pretty much speak to your elected officials. Tell them what's going on. Some don't even know what the price of milk is today. Tell them it's $4.39 in my area. So tell them what's going on in your life, what's going on where you're living, and so that they can understand what to do. You guys can find me on Veteran Legislative Voice, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, and I post my podcasts on there. I'm on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the others there for you.
Yeah, I wonder when we're going to get to the point where we stop saying Twitter. That X, it used to be Twitter.
I know, it's too weird to say X.
But very, very good. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You have been very, very insightful. Gave us a lot of education on what's going on with this and why we need to pay attention to these legislative moves. So I want to stay tuned to America's Heroes Group. We will be back. I'm going to some beautiful music, so just stick around, and I'll be on the other side.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank's Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
We have in our Chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, and service and food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yes. Yes.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us. Oh.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Beautiful music, beautiful music. Love it, love it, love it. America's Heroes Group Roundtable with our partners. We are actually here looking at Globally Connected with KFF Health News. Today is Saturday, October 28th, 2023. October is also Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Try to make some contributions to these or help the people who are suffering from these issues. We need to be much more of a community. Our host is Cliff Kelley, the iconic one, and I am the co-host, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is the unforgettable, incredible Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And today we have a very, very special panelist with us. Judith Graham is a contributing columnist, writes the Navigating Aging column for KFF Health News. She has covered the healthcare for more than 30 years. She's been an investigative reporter, national correspondent, and senior health reporter at the Chicago Tribune, and a regular contributor to the New York Times New Old Age blog. Judith was the first topic leader on aging for the Association of Healthcare Journalists. Her work has appeared in publications including Stats News, the Washington Post, and the Journal of the American Medical Association. She is a graduate of Harvard College and has a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University. She wrote something that I looked at, and she should win a Pulitzer Prize for it. It's a fantastic article, and I encourage you to read her writings. But she is talking about the navigating aging. And as I was reading this, I was reading her article as I was taking a walk, and I started looking down at my pot belly and started saying, oh my God, how's my back gonna do? Do I need a colonoscopy? And boy, I did stay up late last night. So things like that were popping into my head as I was reading this. And I said, this is a masterful article. Welcome, Judith.
I'm delighted to be here. And one thing that wasn't on my resume, I grew up in Chicago.
Oh, my goodness. That is fantastic. I knew you had something incredible in you.
Exactly.
But yeah, tell us about this topic. I'm so excited about it because, you know, one of the things that really just pulled me back, because I'm a physician myself, but it actually made me think too. And when I was looking at this, the one thing was the focus should not be on reversing our aging, rather it should be understanding and acclimating to it and understanding the process we're going through. Such a powerful article you wrote.
Boy, you said that really well. I mean, there are all kinds of outfits out there trying to sell you stuff to make you be younger, whether it's supplements or, some places say, if you're really wealthy, you can get blood from young people and have it injected into you. You name it, somebody's hawking that. And this is the book, the one I wrote about, by a very distinguished geriatrician at Mount Sinai in New York. They actually had the first training program for geriatricians in the United States. Her name is Roseanne Leipzig, and she's in her 70s. And she called her book Honest Aging. And it's a tell it like it is, not tell you what you want to hear, which is that you can be young forever. But, this is what you can look forward to as you grow older. And it's a very dense book. She covers so many things, how our taste changes, our hearing changes, our eyesight changes, our musculoskeletal system, our sleep, you name it. What's good is that you can read this, and I'm 69, 68, I'm going to be 69 soon. You can say, I see myself in this, or I see what's coming up. And number one, you don't feel so alone. And number two, as you said, you can prepare for it in some ways or recognize it when it happens to you.
Yes, yes. This is so fascinating. That's one of the number one books I'm going to go out and get after reading your article, because a 400 plus page guidebook, it must have some incredible information contained within it, because there are so many things we always question ourselves about. Because one of the things that you mentioned in your article as well is the issue about, oh, I forgot something, and it's like, do I have dementia? Because we automatically think, oh, I lost my keys somewhere, or I forgot to pick something up or lock the door. Does that mean I have full-blown dementia or Alzheimer's disease? And that could be very, very frightening for people.
It's a huge issue. One of the things that, I learned so much from reading this book, and I write about aging. I've written about aging for about a dozen years. So one of the things that I learned, I already knew that, as we grow older, our short-term memory tends to become, a little less efficient, and we lose memory for names. That is completely common. Everybody I know is now searching for names. That is common. One of the things I learned is that the ability to multitask, to be looking at your phone and driving or, be looking at your email and, on a phone conversation, or be, just doing multiple things at once, it doesn't work as well as we get older. So what we might see as, oh boy, I'm not as sharp as I used to be, it could be that you just need to focus on one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. And if you focus in that way, you'll be good at doing that thing and then turn your attention to the next thing. You might have to organize things a little bit differently.
So I have to slow down when I feed my cat, because if I forget her name, Sophia, I just have to look at her and say, "Cat, come over here and eat."
Yeah, hopefully she listens. My cat's never listened to me.
Oh no, she's independent. But you were mentioning some things that were really interesting, because in your article you talk about how cognition slows down, but also the musculoskeletal system feels less flexible, and so people have to start thinking about how they are maintaining their balance and those kinds of things. But there are some potential things you can do for that.
There's a lot that you can do for it, and it doesn't mean going to the gym. One of the things, this is something I plan to write about, is there are now a lot of programs online, whether they're exercise programs or, teaching you how to do strength exercises or resistance exercises that you can do at home. I once talked to a geriatrician about some of these strength exercises. He said, get a can of Campbell's soup in each hand and just raise it. All the way up and bring it back down, and all the way up and bring it back down. You don't need to go buy weights. You can do a lot of these things in your own home if you learn how to do them. And it's really important. I think the most important thing that, I keep on hearing from everybody is do everything possible to keep moving, because that's essential to the health of our entire body. So whether it's taking a walk outside, or I know in the Chicago winters people can't get outside necessarily, up and down your hallway, doing what you can at home, every little bit makes a difference.
Yes. And it's the amount of just the consistency, making sure that you're always doing something. And today I did my 10,000 steps, because I got into this kick about doing steps and just taking a walk, and you don't have to run and beat your body up, and as you were saying, do things that are going to be actually detrimental to your health, because if you start tearing muscles, or the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments don't hold up as well as we're getting older and older. So those things can lead to falls and those kinds of things. Our bones are a little bit more brittle. So just making sure that you're just consistently doing something is so important.
Yeah, build it into your schedule and start slow, and add things slowly onto your schedule. One of the things that I, have thought was so interesting is that older adults, and we're talking, people after the age of 65, but of course it changes as you move through the different, periods of older age. They don't realize when they're thirsty. Their ability to sense thirst diminishes. So a lot of people get dehydrated without knowing it. So, one of the things, in addition to like building some, just moving around into your schedule, every hour you get up and you walk around for 5 minutes. Even, that can make a difference. Drink a cup of water, every hour and a half. And, even when you don't feel like you really need it, you might need it.
Yes, yeah, because those motivations, those basic instincts we have for thirst and or even taste diminishes some, as well, as you were mentioning in your article, that your food can actually change in its type of appeal to you because your taste buds aren't as active, aren't perceiving the full flavor and aroma of something that's you're putting in your mouth.
Right, so people might stop eating because it's just not as pleasurable, to which you can say, add more spices to your food. You're making fried chicken, add some, garlic salt.
Oh, yes, yeah. You're
right?
making me hungry already.
Yeah, you might need to add more of that kind of stuff so that the food still tastes good.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. And there was something else you were talking about the sleep cycle, how it becomes fragmented as well. And that is something that I've noticed myself. Like, I'm 66 now, but I've noticed that if I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, it's a little bit more difficult to go back to sleep. And it makes me, and I still get about between 7 and 8 hours a day. I try to, but that is an issue.
Oh, it's a big issue, and I, for the first time, am like you. I'm experiencing sleep issues I never had before, and one of the things, a very practical thing, is, well, first of all, keep your room dark. It helps if the room is on the chillier side, cooler side, as opposed to warm. Dr. Leipzig told me that the falling of the temperatures at night is part of a signal that to our bodies that it's time to go to sleep.
Oh,
so
very interesting. Yeah.
Don't keep the temperature up way high. Keep the lights off, and do not use those digital devices in bed.
Yes. Yeah, you hear the beeping all night with the emails coming in, and too much,
right.
too much. Yeah.
And don't eat a big meal, because some of our, digestion, a lot of our basic systems operate less efficiently and more slowly. So you don't want, to go to bed bloated. So eat a little bit on the earlier side, so that your, digestive system has a chance to process that before you go to bed.
Yeah, because that can actually also increase your risk for reflux and, and aspiration even into the lungs of food content if you're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of really sensible, practical things that you can do. The problem is, how do you find out what they are, right? I mean, hopefully you have a grandmother who's wise who tells you, but this, it's interesting because Dr. Leipzig told me when she wrote this book, I'm of the generation that when we became pregnant, we read a book called What to Expect When You're Expecting, about pregnancy, that walked you through the 9 months.
I think I've heard
and
that
gave
book.
you information. That's what she set out to do with this book. Of course, it's not 9 months. It can be, older age can be 10, 20, 30 years. That's a long period of time. And it doesn't, there's no one way of going through it. It was a bit of a hard sell for her to find a place to publish the book because it's more complicated than pregnancy. But there's so much good practical advice as well as information that she writes about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Also, you were mentioning things about the eyesight, how that changes, as well as hearing. But, we need much more light to read when we're older. And I've noticed that, that I start reading and I turn on the lights and it's like, that's not enough light. And I've been reading under that same light for a long time, for years.
Right. and then, of course, going down the stairs. So your ability to see the contrast between light and shade and between different colors changes. So you might not see that step as clearly as you have in the past.
Very interesting, because one of the leading causes of death in the nation, and people don't really talk about it much, is falls.
Absolutely.
Because, if you fall and you fracture your femur, or your hip bone, right, you can actually lose, a few liters of blood, 3 or 4 liters of blood in an empty space. It's a potential space. And many people are, they've found, non-responsive after, having internal bleeding. And so just getting up out of bed, even taking time to get out of bed, to adjust, because you were mentioning also about the light, that it may take more time for you to adjust going from dark to light and light to dark.
Right.
And, yeah.
And one of the things that I wrote about is, or that the doctor wrote about and then I wrote about in my article, is that the symptoms of illness for older adults are different than they are for younger adults. This was an issue with the COVID pandemic, that older adults did not, get sick in the same way that younger people did. And so they didn't even know that, this was potentially the virus that they had. And doctors didn't know either. So with a heart attack, it might be a feeling of weakness as opposed to pain in the chest. With pneumonia, it might be fatigue as opposed to, trouble breathing. It just, with depression, people might be more apathetic or irritable than sad. So it's easy to miss things in older adults if you don't have doctors who sort of know what they're doing.
Oh, Judith, I could speak to you all day. We have 2 minutes left on this. It's like it's been going by so fast because it's really enjoyable talking to you. But you did one line in this in your article that I thought was really remarkable, because it's something I use all the time. It's because of accumulated damage to hair cells in the inner ear, it's harder to hear, especially at high frequencies. It's also harder to understand speech that's rapid and loaded with information, or that occurs in noisy environments. I'm going to tell this to my wife all the time because she yells at me. And she said, "You're not listening." So it may just be my age that's getting in the way.
She's got probably a higher pitch because she's a woman.
Okay.
So slow the speech down. Don't go to restaurants where there's a lot of loud noise and where people are talking over each other. You're not going to be able to hear as well.
Not hear as well. Yes. Well, that gets me out part of the problem, but anything you want to really push through really quick in 1 minute, that you think people need to know, other than reading your phenomenal article, which I think you should get the Pulitzer Prize for, but anything else that you think that they need to know?
Well, the final thing I would say is get your medications checked. Don't assume just because you've been taking that medication for 10, 15 years that your body is reacting to it in the same way. That's because that changes too as we get older. So talk to your doctors about whether you need the medication, whether you're taking the right dose. And that's a really important thing to do.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Judith. But we're going to go on to the next segment, and stay tuned to America's Heroes Group. We will be right back. Stay there, listen to the music, and be back. We'll be here. The voice will still be here.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation.
Ooh, nice music, nice music. We have to get back to business, though. America's Heroes Group, Roundtable, we are globally connected with our partners, and we are looking at something that is going to be an incredible topic that you need to listen very closely to. The topic is a follow-up of military sexual suit against General Hyten. It ends in a rare settlement. Our panelist is Lindsay Knapp, a U.S. Army veteran, attorney, chair of the Military and Veterans Women's Coalition, and executive director of Combat Sexual Assault. She actually has been working very diligently on making sure that this stays a vital and important topic and that we don't lose focus on it. And I'm going to, hello, Lindsay, but you can start off by telling us a little bit more about this. Why is this so important for us to know?
Yeah, so military sexual trauma is a huge issue, and it's really causing a national security crisis because folks are not re-enlisting. The military's got this huge recruitment problem, but moreover, it's just plain wrong to be sexually assaulting, being sexually assaulted by someone you serve with. But what we have seen recently is that, traditionally service members have been barred from suing their perpetrator. So if the service member is assaulted by another service member, they've traditionally been barred from suing for civil damages. But we've seen a little bit of a break in that with, in the case of Spolester and General Hyten. General Hyten sexually assaulted Colonel Spolester, and when she sued for damages, she was able to chip away at this doctrine, as the courts refer to it as the Ferris Doctrine, and she was able to walk away with the settlement. So what we know is that, according to the Department of Defense, 64% of service members who report a sexual assault experience retaliation, and it's just getting harder and harder for service members to report safely and to not essentially be gaslit into submissions. Something that we see a lot is that after a service member reports is that the command team will say things to them like, oh, that was consensual, and then send them back to work. Or they may command refer them to behavioral health, essentially forcing them to undergo mental health evaluation to help further the narrative that they're just crazy, right? Like they're just reporting this because they're a crazy person and we're going to kick them out as a result. So what we do at our organization is we represent service members and veterans who either are currently in the process, they've reported a sexual assault and are being retaliated against, or perhaps maybe they were kicked out after reporting a sexual assault, and we guide them through that legal process.
Right. Yeah, and so this case in particular is really unique, right? Because it actually did, as you had mentioned, the Ferris Doctrine, it actually went and sort of pierced that veil, right?
Yeah, it sure did. And so we're not entirely sure how it's going to play out with other cases other than this one, but it's certainly a really great sign that the courts are kind of leaning away from, applying this doctrine like carte blanche to everyone. And what the government argued in an effort to further their position essentially was that sexual assault was inherent to service, which is kind of like a really wild position that you would hope your government would never take, right? That service members should essentially be expected to be sexually assaulted. And so the court ultimately rejected that argument and thankfully declared that sexual assault is not inherent to service and somebody who serves should not have to worry about that. Because what we are seeing is that you are more likely to be sexually assaulted while serving in the military than you are to be injured, shot, killed, captured, et cetera, by the enemy. And that's just a really frightening statistic. So that's where we are with our clients, and we're trying to kind of guide them through that process in an effort to hopefully expand, the award that, Colonel Spolster was able to get, and see if we're able to get that for others as well.
Well, at the heart of everything, there is, there are so many different, it's a very complex issue with all the things that are going on. And, there needs to be some kind of doctrinal change, right? I mean, about what is permissible and what is not. And it should be part of the service members' training, I would imagine, because I've had people I know who were, gay members of the military who actually went through sexual assault with their partners, and other people who are doing that. But it's a way that we have to start thinking about. You are a human, but you're a service member, and that should not be going anywhere between anyone.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and our service members, they have ramped up the training quite a bit in regards to this, but our position is that it's not the training that they need, but what we need, training is great, but we need these leaders who are sweeping it under the rug to be held accountable. So if a service member goes to their commander and says, I was sexually assaulted, and they say, nope, get back to work, we need them prosecuted for obstruction of justice. And that's not something that we're seeing. What we're seeing is the Department of Defense put in all these new processes to, quote unquote, help victims. And I like to use the quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and what he would say is, he's talking about folks who fell into the river and, we're pulling them out. And he says that, at some point we have to ask the question of why they fell in.
Yes.
And so with the military, right. And so what the military is doing with these trainings and with these prevention measures is it's essentially like throwing life jackets to people who have fallen in the river, without acknowledging that they are the ones that in fact pushed us in to begin with. So if they held literally anybody at the senior level accountable for these things that we can prove that various commanders looked their service member directly in the eye and said, nope, that sex was consensual, get back to work, and prosecuted them for obstruction of justice, the ripple effects of that would be enormous, which is why this Spolster case was so important, because this was the first time that senior leaders were held accountable civilly for monetary damages. So we're calling for leaders to be held accountable not only criminally for obstructing justice when a service member reports an assault, but also be held accountable civilly so that way service members can get monetary damages from the person that assaulted them. And then once you see that, then I feel like there's going to be a huge change really, really quick, because right now people who are committing these atrocities, they know that they can do it without punishment.
Yes. And then, also, Heighton, he had retired in 2021, after a 2-year stint with the Joint Chiefs. But he's now heading a foundation arm for the space venture, company Blue Origin, and that's Jeff Bezos. So, I'm wondering whether people need to just be held accountable, and how do you, have someone like that be, being very cautious about what they are allowed to do, what, agency they have with joining another company, and then, do you want that to be in your company?
Right, absolutely. So we need we need a degree of outrage from folks other than just like myself and you to say that, right? That Heighton does not need to be working at having this foundation, and he does not need to be supported and be working for Jeff Bezos. Like, he has committed some atrocities, and he should just kind of fly off into the abyss. He also needs to be prosecuted criminally, but at the very least, she was able to get some headway civilly. But that's a really a great example of what happens, right? Because even though, we had a mini victory where she was able to collect some civil damages against Heighton. What is he doing? He's just going back living his best little life. So it shows that there's still so much work that needs to be done and so much more education that needs to be done with the American public and, throughout the military to make sure everybody knows that this is not okay.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was wondering also, because I joined the military in 1984 and retired in 2010. And I'm wondering, I was looking at a lot of intergenerational changes. Do you see things changing as far as the generations that people are in when they're entering military service or serving, currently? Do you see any differences in how things are being approached?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you were serving, like in the 80s through 2010, there was certainly a growth of women serving, right? There was not very many in the 80s, and certainly there was more when you got out, and there's more and more joining every day. And so in the earlier days, right, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it was really considered almost a part of service that you were going to be sexually harassed or assaulted, and that you just had to take it, So I got out of the Army in 2008, and I remember at my first duty station, my supervisor bought me a vibrator, and at the time, I know, right? And so he was very concerned that I wasn't having enough sex and wanted to make sure that I could be able to do that on my own.
You have got to be kidding me. Boy, that's the first time.
And and that was in the early 2000s, and I was still very young at the time, and at the time when it happened, I was like, Roger, sir, you know what I mean? And I just took it and kept it moving. I never even thought that I had an opportunity to make a complaint. I completely believed that was incident to my service. But now what I'm seeing come 2023 is we've got a lot of really brave service members that, despite being retaliated against to this degree, they are fired up. And so they are coming forward more than they have. I mean, certainly when I was serving, and they're calling a spade, even at risk of getting kicked out of service or being retaliated against and all those things. And I feel like the military is coming to kind of like a reckoning point, because they're like, oh crap, we've got to do something about all of this. The men and women who are being assaulted are finally speaking up for themselves, whereas before, maybe they were like me, and I was just kind of like, well, I chose to serve my country, and if I want to serve my country, this is just something I'm going to have to endure, is what went through my mind at that time. But now, like I said, they're just so much more brave, and I'm very excited to see the service members today really, putting their foot down.
Yeah, and it's also on the it's mostly women who get assaulted, right? And it has to be something about the code of ethic for a military veteran or military personnel, where if you are a male and you see something happening, put a stop to it, call people out on it. You're part of the solution to the problem, and it's making sure that you don't allow people to say things. I mean, I'm African American, and I've heard people tell jokes, African American jokes and all that, right? And and I've heard people, the microaggressions that happen all the time, and you get to the point where it's like you have to say, stop, or someone.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. And if someone's talking about a woman or someone from another ethnicity or another background, whether they're Greek or, Mongolian, you stop them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, when the military is not mad at me and they let me come in to train their troops, that we train them on bystander intervention and what that, exactly, right. And what that means, right. And how important it is, and really how just one person stepping up can make a difference, right. Because what happens is when nobody says anything, then the unit just assumes that this is what, and the group thinks that this is just what happens, this is how we behave. But when that one, right. Exactly. And then when that one person steps up, it can change the entire trajectory of that unit. And it's just so important, as I look back on my service, I I was very fortunate in the sense that I was an officer, and I had some non-commissioned officers who really just looked out for me. And anytime something bad was about to happen to me, they'd be like, LT, don't do that. I know you were just ordered to do this. Don't do it. And they would always pull me aside and keep me safe, despite, they could see things that I couldn't see.
Right,
and
right.
And so, in a sense, even though I had some terrible experiences, I was very lucky in that sense that I had somebody looking out. And but for that, I can only imagine I would have had such a worse experience than I had had.
Yes. And then and as people, we have to be careful. Both men and women have to how you carry yourself in the military too. And making sure that people understand what the boundaries are. And
right, because there's no boundaries, it seems sometimes, with some of these service members. They're out there living.
Yeah.
They're living their best life, but I feel like they forget that this is a job, right? Like, and then there's behaviors that you can't do at the workplace, right? There's just some things you can't do. And there's certainly not enough people out there drawing that line for them. They're just letting it roll.
Yeah, and it's particularly disturbing to me when I see people who have advanced years in the military, especially if if you're 17 years old and you're crazy, that's one kind of person. But the person that's there for 10, 20 years and still allows things to happen, and it could be their mother, their sister, their daughter, their cousin, their aunt, that they're watching something happen to. You have to wake up and realize that this is a person that is in the military family. It's part of your family, and you need to speak up and say no.
Right. Yeah, and we're seeing it. Yeah, and we're just seeing these folks go up through the ranks because they've never seen somebody held accountable for that. Right. So the behavior has gone unchecked. And as they continue to rise up through the ranks, all the way up through General Hyten, he was able to do what he wanted as a young officer, and he just continued that behavior up until the end. And can you imagine what would have happened if somebody had intervened at any point in his however long, 30, 40 plus long year career, and intervened and just said, hey, like,
what are you doing?
You can't do that, right. Like, what are you doing? This is insane. But how many people co-signed his checks for him as he went up the ranks? So I'm glad you brought up bystander intervention, because it's just so important, and it shows how much of an impact people can make where they are right now.
That's right.
There's this code of ethics kind of in the military, where you got to stand by your brother and sister in arms, right? And so some folks aren't quite as inclined to maybe like tell on their service member, but I encourage them to really think about it differently. Like, you're protecting them, you're protecting them from these horrible injustices, and we kind of see this in the family dynamic too, because 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 6 men are sexually assaulted prior to the age of 18. And so this is out of our civilian population. And so that's a huge number. And so why you have to ask yourself, why is that number so large? And that number is so large because a lot of people keep that in the family. Yeah. Right. And so if you're sexually assaulted,
statistic again, because that's a really important.
It is. It's 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 6 men. So we're really talking about a third, between a fifth and a third of the population right now has already been sexually assaulted. And so we're talking about kids being sexually assaulted. So we've got a childhood sexual assault epidemic in the country that's going unchecked. And if somebody's sexually assaulting a child, it's really likely that person, the perpetrator, is close to the family in some way, right? Like a teacher, a clergy member, a coach, an aunt, an uncle, like somebody who's in that circle to have access. And so if we're not addressing it even, to our listeners who are not in the military, and they're like, well, I don't know how this affects me. And I'm like, well, it affects you in the exact same way in your own family dynamic, right? Like, and so if even our civilian population, if they've got the courage to be bystanders in their own right, they can make a difference as their children grow, and whether or not they join the service or not.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up too, is that this is not a unique situation in the military. It's part of our general culture that we need to really address, because these abusers who are out there. I remember, growing up. I grew up Catholic, but in New York City, and I remember the priest offering. I was an altar boy, offering us wine, which is inappropriate after service. And I remember one person that was actually sexually assaulted because of that. And and to this day, it still bothers me that people were actually able to do that. That entrusted with that. So we're talking about priests, and then you're talking about military leaders. You join the military because you have a certain amount of respect or admiration for that profession and for the people who are in it, and you see them as heroes, and for them to do that to you is almost like the priest, doing something to you. And I think that they need to really bring this to a point where people are much more educated about this, as you're saying. But intervention is so important. As you were saying, well, I'll give you a pass because I'm the captain over this particular squad, right, or whatever, and you can be promoted. No. This should be taken into account when you're talking about evaluations, because it talks directly to unit cohesion, to your discipline, your ability to be disciplined, and to your respect for another service member. And plus it's illegal, but that's another
right story.
I
mean that too. For sure.
But that's something that should really be instilled in all the leaders, that this is something that needs to be on the table for evaluations, for promotion.
And it's they've added a block to most evaluations to where they have to talk about that, but the problem is that it's like throwing a life jacket to somebody who's already thrown us in the river, right? Like they're not going to be inclined to be like, hey, I was just sexually harassing Susie and Bob, but just to make sure you don't put them in.
Yes, very, very good. Important information. Well, I have someone buzzing around my head. It's Glenda. So it looks like we're going to get another service announcement coming up.
Right on.
But she said right on.
You're so phenomenal. I've just loved you to pieces.
Oh, love you too.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to partner with America's Heroes Group and allowing us to have your voice on a platform that represents women veterans overall, because you give strength and power to their voice. So thank you for speaking truth to power.
Thank you, and thank you so much for all the work you guys do. We really appreciate it.
Ditto.
Okay,
Well, we have come to the close of another Saturday show, America's Heroes Group. 7 years, Dr. Arnold.
Yes.
You have been. And let me explain to you where Dr. Arnold has been. This is, I think, his 6th degree he has earned. He was on sabbatical for 2 years, pursuing his master's degree. And bravo, congratulations, he earned it, of course, with honors, like he does everything else he does. So he's been on sabbatical, and now he's back. So the family is whole again. So thank you so much, sweetheart, for being a part of America's Heroes Group.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you
for bringing the excellence and integrity that has been the foundation of what we have done from day one. It's never been about money, because we don't have money. We don't have sponsors that shuts us down, and we talk what is needed, which is resources and information, regardless to what kind of eggshells and china we break. We don't give a damn.
Yes.
We intentionally speak the truth here.
Yeah,
regarding our military of retired, active, and their family members.
Yes.
So,
and thank you so much, Lindsay, for all of your input and what you do for veterans. And Glenda didn't joke with me this year. She usually says around Halloween, I said, Dr. Arnold, what kind of mask are you wearing? And I didn't have one on, so.
You are so full of it, Dr. Arnold.
He's living his best life this year.
He is living his best life. He really is.
I see one of those little drums in the background, the dump.
Absolutely. So thank you to our technical producer today, Titus Williams. He's the best at WVON. He's been also a part of our programming show since we started in 2016. Yes. And to the best digital media director producer we have ever had, Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Production. If you seriously want to bring your business and get exposed to a level of people understanding of who you are and what you're about, please feel free to call Scouts Arnold Production, 773-671-4826. Go to America's Heroes Group YouTube page. That's Scouts Arnold Production. That's what he does. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So thank you to all for listening, for helping us to become who we are because of you. And we just want you guys to keep supporting, keep listening. And if you can make a donation, please do it because we need it. We need it because it helps us keep coming to you, bringing you resources and information that you need. So have a wonderful, blessed weekend, everybody.
Yes, and we are not on the salary. I'm telling you.
Not at all. Everybody works for free. Everybody. Okay, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
All right.